GLP-1 medications are everywhere right now. Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound. They're on social media, they're in headlines, and honestly, they're probably in conversations that you're having with your friends. You're seeing the transformations, the rapid weight loss, the before and after that look almost unreal. But here's what's not being talked about loudly enough: the women that are actually taking them. The women who are exhausted, who are overwhelmed, and who are finally trying something that actually works. I'm Dr. Marino. Welcome to the Elevator Project. As a physician, I've treated hundreds of women on GLP-1s. As a woman, I've watched my friends, my colleagues, and my patients navigate weight loss, plateaus, hormonal shifts, side effects, and honestly, I would even say identity changes. So today I'm giving you something different. Not a glamorized sales pitch and not a fear-based lecture. This is the GLP-1 reality check that women actually deserve. What do GLP-1s actually do? I want to simplify this because the internet overcomplicates it. GLP-1 medications, they mimic a hormone that your body already makes. They slow down gastric emptying, they reduce your appetite, they improve your blood sugar control, it stabilizes your insulin, and it quiets what women usually tend to describe as food noise. That constant mental chatter of, what should I eat? Did I eat too much? I'm still hungry. I want to eat more. And many women are saying that that noise is finally quiet. And that alone can feel life-changing. But the clinical truth, I will say, is that GLP-1s don't cause weight loss directly. They're creating the conditions for weight loss by making it easier for your body to stay in a caloric deficit and by regulating your metabolism. So yes, they are powerful, they can be powerful, but they're not magic. They're tools. And like any medical tool, they require proper dosing, they require monitoring, nutrition support, and an actual medical oversight. So what are the women that would do best on GLP-1s? They tend to have one thing in common. They tend to be women whose biology have been working against them for years. So that's your woman that has insulin resistance or PCOS, perimenopausal, history of yo-yo dieting, central weight gain, like mostly around the belly, strong food cravings, or emotional eating. And importantly, many of these women are dealing with chronic stress and cortisol dysregulation. They're not always women that are lacking discipline. These are women whose metabolism is dysregulated. So when they start GLP-1, it doesn't feel like a shortcut. It feels like relief because it feels like, finally, my body is cooperating. But let's be clear, GLP-1, like any medication, it's not for everybody. So there are certain women that should actually not take GLP-1, or they should be extremely cautious. So if you have significant GI disorders, if you have a history of pancreatitis, if you have an eating disorder or a low BMI, severe malnutrition, or certain thyroid condition, you should completely avoid GLP-1s. That's not about fear. It's about appropriate patient selection, because if the GLP-1 is used in the wrong population, it's not just that it's going to fail, it can actually cause harm. And here's where I really want to have the honest conversation. Most GLP-1 research was not designed around female physiology. It was actually designed with men. And clinically, this matters because there are certain symptoms and there are certain signs that we see in women who started GLP-1s and for whom this became a really distressing situation due to lack of awareness. So I'll talk about a couple. Number one, it's your menstrual changes. I actually see this all the time. The cycles are becoming irregular. They're either shorter or longer. They're heavier or lighter. And the reason for it is fairly simple. Because your fat tissue stores estrogen, once you lose the fat rapidly, it leads to your hormones shifting. For some women over time, this stabilizes, and for some others, it's just worth continuing to be monitored. Secondly is the muscle loss, and that's a big one, and honestly, it's not talked about enough. If a woman loses weight quickly without adequate protein intake and resistant training, she's not losing just fat. She's losing lean muscle mass, and sometimes that loss is about 30 to 40% of lean muscle mass, and that leads to slower metabolism, hormonal disruption, difficulty maintaining weight loss later. And that is usually why a lot of women will regain all of the weight once they stop the GLP-1. So it's not a medication failure, but it's because their muscle was lost in the process. Third is the malnutrition risk. Many women already undereat, and then they start the GLP-1 and they eat even less. So what we see is low B12, low iron, low protein intake. So we get the fatigue, the hair loss, the brain fog, the poor recovery. Yes, a woman on GLP-1 may be losing the weight, but at what cost? Number 4, the gut changes. That is a very common symptom that is seen in the patient who is on GLP-1. Women already have a slower GI motility than men, and GLP-1s will slow it even more. So you see that frequently the patient will present with constipation, bloating, nausea, and if it is not managed properly, it becomes a major compliance issue. And that's very frequently where we see a failure in the effectiveness of the GLP-1 and in the weight loss process. And the stress and the cortisol, that is one that most people completely miss. But if you think about it, if you combine high stress, low calorie intake, poor sleep, you get elevated cortisol. And elevated cortisol will lead to plateaus, fatigue, irritability, poor recovery. So very frequently, the first thing that the patient would think is the medication stopped working. But biologically, it's not that it stopped working, it's that your body is in a stress response. If you're on GLP-1 and no one is checking your labs, that is a problem. At minimum, you should be monitoring your CMP, your CBC, your A1C, your fasting insulin, your lipid panel, ferritin, B12, vitamin D, thyroid panel. And in many women, I also check your inflammatory markers, your ESR-CRP, your sex hormone, and your cortisol. Because weight loss is not just about the scale, it's about what's happening internally. If you missed my previous episode about the labs that women over 25 should always check and know about, I highly recommend that you go take a look because it will discuss all of those labs that I just mentioned. Now let's get back to it. So, how do we do this right? If you're going to use a GLP-1, do it in a way that actually supports your body. Taking protein intake around 90 to 125 grams a day, obviously depends on activity level. Strength training at least 3 times a week. Hydration and electrolytes daily. Strategic supplementation of magnesium, omega-3, probiotics, B12 and iron if needed. That is how you protect your muscle. That's how you protect your energy, your hormone, and that's how you see long-term results. Now, when do you call your provider? I usually tell my patients, if you see persistent vomiting, severe abdominal pain, inability to tolerate food and water, you're dizzy or you're actually fainting, rapid or unintentional weight loss, even beyond what you would expect. You get severe palpitation, you're extremely fatigued. Those are not things to push through. Those are red flags, and you call your provider right away. So here's what I want you to take away from this. You're allowed to use GLP-1 medication, or you're allowed to not use them. Your decision should be informed, it should be intentional, and medically supported. It shouldn't be based on social media pressure. It shouldn't be based on shame, and it should not be based on desperation, because your body is not a trend, and your health deserves more than a quick fix. If this helped you understand GLP-1s in a real, honest way, subscribe, because I'm going to keep breaking down women's health in a way that actually makes sense. And if you're currently on GLP-1 or considering GLP-1, make sure that you're doing it in a way that protects your metabolism long term. Because the goal is not just weight loss, it is sustainable and optimal health. I also invite you to download the GLP-1 Women's Checklist that I have on my website, www.elevatorproject.com. On the blog, I will have the link in the caption below. Thank you for being here, and I will see you on our next episode.